Hello dear students of Literature and Humanities section. Today we are going to talk about Unit 4, Psychology, the Individual and Oneself. By the end of this session you will be able to identify the term self-portrait, recognize strategies to boost self-imaging, respond to WH questions, draw a character sketch, and classify character traits. Now let's begin the self. What are other words for self-image? It is ego, self-esteem, self-respect, self-worth, dignity, self-importance, and self-confidence. All these terms reflect self-image, show self-image. Now some people, they overestimate themselves. As you see this cat, it looks at the mirror to see a lion. Other people underestimate themselves, like this young girl. She believes she is not talented, she is not smart. Such people have incongruent image, which means, as you see, there is little overlap between the self-image and the ideal self. Such people, they have difficulty in self-actualization. They feel difficulty in self-actualization, but such people, they are able to work on themselves to improve their self-image, to make it better. Like this young boy who looks at the mirror, who loves himself, who believes in himself, this person has a congruent character, which means his self-image is more close to the ideal self. You see, there is a more overlap. His self-image is close to the ideal self. Self-image is similar to the ideal self. This person has self-actualization. Now it's important to know yourself properly, since false estimation may lead to dissatisfaction, scorn, envy, and negativity. When you have false estimation, you have a negativity toward the world. However, self-realization may lead to gratitude, hope, inspiration, and creativity and innovation. This gives a positive attitude toward life. As you see, when you have negative views about oneself, we are going to have negative views about the world, which is going to give negative views about the future, and consequently it's going to affect us as well. Thus, negativity is going to affect us, affect the world, affect the future, and it's going to turn to us as well. The self is not something that one finds. It is something that one creates, as it is said. Thus, we are able to improve our self-image. How? How can you enhance your self-image? First, avoid focusing on what you cannot do. Instead, focus on what you can do. Instead of looking at the things that I cannot do, that I cannot accomplish, let us look at things that I am able to do. If I'm not good in cooking, fine, I can be good in something else. So focus on the things that you are able to do. Second, I believe in me. It's important. When you believe in yourself, when you believe in your abilities, you are able to achieve. You are able to do something. So trust your abilities and then go on. Third, self-awareness. It's important to know ourselves. It's important to distinguish ourselves among others. See who am I, what I can do. Know yourself, what you like, what you are. Fourth, making mistakes to enhance self-esteem and improve performance. To learn in life, you need to try. And when you try, certainly you are going to make mistakes. Such mistakes help you to improve your performance. Thus, to learn, you need to perform. To perform is to make mistakes. Mistakes teach you. Finally, I love me. It's important to love yourself. When you love yourself, you have a better image, you are able to do things, you are able to trust your abilities, you are able to achieve many things in your life. It's important to love yourself as you are and work on improving it. Now let's do some application exercises. Answer the following questions. Number 1, contrast congruent and incongruent images of oneself. Now let us think, dear students. The question here is to contrast. It means find the differences as mentioned in the templates above. My answer should include while or however. As you see, congruent image of oneself is when the person has a correct image of himself or herself and his or her abilities, while, do you see, this makes the contrast. I can say however, I can say but. Incongruent image is when the person has a false idea about himself. Question 2. List the factors that help us achieve self-actualization. Come on, dear. I mentioned 5 factors which help us achieve self-actualization. Let us remember them together. The elements that contribute to help individuals attain self-actualization are focusing on their abilities, believing in themselves, having self-awareness, improving performance, and loving the self. Do you see the parallel structure here? I am listing the elements. So I said the elements are, I started with focusing, ing. All the elements that I mentioned, they ended with ing. As you see, this is a parallel structure, which is important when we respond to answers which include listing. Number 3, how do you define yourself? Come on, every one of you, look at himself and try to describe himself. A student may describe himself as hard worker, brave, passionate, who never gives up. Now let us look at this selection which highlights 2 persons, Brian and his father, and show how they contributed differently to life matters. We have 2 characters who reacted differently. Yes. Brian's father, William Head, has no doubt why his only child chose to take his life in front of his classmates 5 years ago. Brian wanted everyone to know the source of his pain, the suffering he could no longer endure. As a teenager, overweight with thick glasses, he had been regularly abused by school bullies since elementary school. Death was the only relief he could imagine. Children cannot take appropriate decisions or deal with troubles. They are trapped, says Head. After his son's death, William Head became an activist against bullying and founded an organization, Kids Hope, to prevent others from suffering as Brian had. Now let us draw a character sketch of Brian. But before we draw a character sketch of Brian, let us stop with how we are able to identify a character. What are the elements of a character? A character is made up of 2 things. Number 1, physical traits, like age, size, color, clothes, pose, and many other things. Usually such physical traits are mentioned in the text by the writer. We do not deduce them. The second are the mental traits. Mental traits are not mentioned in the text. We deduce them. How? By looking how the person speaks, what he thinks, and how he behaves. Thus, the behavior, the speech, and the thoughts of the character are able to make us know how to deduce his character. Like he is generous, helpful, resilient, mean, etc. Now let's go back to the character of Brian. We have this text. Let us try to find the character sketch of Brian. We look at the text. As you see here, this part describes him physically. As a teenager, overweight, with thick glasses, he had been regularly abused by school bullies since elementary school. This shows his physical characteristics, and by being abused, this shows that he is a person who lacks self-confidence. Death was the only relief he could imagine. This shows what? That he is a person who committed suicide. This means he is a person who is able to surrender, to give up. He could not face. Okay, now these sentences or these ideas, let us put them in a paragraph form. Brian is an overweight teenager who wears thick glasses. His low self-esteem made him a victim of bullying, the fact which broke self-confidence. He became a gloomy, depressed, pessimistic young boy who committed suicide to end his misery. Now let's look at the character of the father. We'll go back to the text to draw a character sketch of the father. Yes, the text doesn't give us physical ideas about the father except that he is what? He is Brian's father. But here it gives us a speech that he gave. Children cannot take appropriate decisions or deal with troubles. They are trapped, says Head. This shows that he is a mature person. He knows about kids. Now, after his son's death, William Head became an activist against bullying and founded an organization called Kids Hope to prevent others from suffering, as Brian had. This shows him as a strong person who is able to do something, to face. Now, let us write the character sketch of the father. The father is a mature person. He is a strong man who was able to accept his son's death. He is such a brave, helpful, and ambitious man who is able to divert his sadness into power by setting up an organization to help victims like his son. Classify each of the given as positive and negative traits in the given table. As you see, this table shows positive and negative traits. Let us solve this exercise. Brilliant, it is positive. Innovative, when you do something new, this is positive. Worried, certainly it is negative. Sympathetic, when you feel with others, it is positive. Stubborn, when you do not change your mind ever, this is negative. Persistent, when you never give up, this is positive. Artistic, positive. Selfish, a self-centered person, is negative. Loyal, positive. Assertive, when you are helpful, this is positive. Hesitant, when you are unable to decide, this is negative. Conceited, negative. Energetic, positive. Gloomy, a pessimistic guy, this is negative. Confident, positive. Raging, you are angry, this is negative. Arrogant, this is also negative. Such character traits and many others help us to identify a character trait. Now, what did we learn in this session? We learned that self-portrait or self-image is how a person thinks about himself or herself. Not all people are able to identify themselves. It is important to have good and positive image about ourselves, which motivates all our actions and enhances ambition and innovation. Thus, be positive and look at the filled part of the cup. Characterization is to analyze a character and to write about his or her traits. These are my references. Thank you for listening and see you next session. Goodbye.